All right, getting wasted in the Middle Ages. There's the video, the name, Medieval Madness. We're getting into it. 11 minutes.
The medievals consumed alcohol all the time.
All the time.
At every event, whether that was a wedding, a funeral, a business negotiation, or the completion of an apprenticeship. They really didn't need an excuse. They even drank at work all day, every day, which begs the question, were the people who lived through the Middle Ages always drunk? It makes you wonder how they could work, fight their many wars, or even function properly when they were all constantly hammered. Welcome to Medieval Madness.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be getting that in a second. Peyton. I'm curious.
Ale everywhere, but not a drop to drink. By the 14th century, brewing was a common occupation in towns and cities across England. Ale was sold out of houses and on the streets.
People were bored, man. People were bored.
On market day, alcohol could be bought at stalls in the marketplace, and there was even more brewing and drinking at fair time. The buying and consumption of alcohol was seen as a necessity rather than a luxury. Red wine. For the wealthier people, there were inns. They first appeared in the 12th and 13th centuries, usually located in towns, and had plenty of staff to look after their rich patrons. Inside the inn, barmaids known as tapsters and chamberlains would see to the client's every need. Even the ostler or groom was there to look after the guest's horse. In 1578, the York magistrates insisted that all innkeepers had to have at least 6, quote, comely and decent honest beds for guests. These people had money and came from the merchant or professional classes. In 1390, a man named John Preen was in London on business from Oxford University. He stayed at an inn in St. Benet's Parish. His room was burgled while he was out, and the grand sum of 200 shillings was stolen in coins and bonds. A huge amount.
Mom said, must be why such good tolerance got them good genes.
At the time, and the equivalent of over £6,500 today, which only goes to show the caliber of the customers using these sort of establishments. Business negotiations often took place in the inns. Technically, trading was supposed to be done exclusively in the marketplace where it could be taxed and regulated. However, this didn't stop many from exchanging contracts in the inns and having a celebratory drink afterwards. Most ordinary people couldn't afford to pay for the wine or the lavish meals that were sold in the inns. Taverns came somewhere between the inn and the lowly alehouse. Here, those with a little more money in their pockets could purchase a cup of wine. Taverns were essentially drinking houses for the rich and lovers of good wine, as one pilgrim neatly put it. One tavern on Paternoster Row in London had 2 floors with 30 seats on each story. The Galley on Lombard Street had, quote, 8 tables, seats and trestles, pots and barrels of Rhenish, Gascon and Malmsey wine. In 1330, to try and slow the culture of drinking, King Edward II ruled that no wine under the price of 3 pence a gallon should be sold because, quote, there be more taverns in the realm than there wont to be.
Lots of taverns.
Drinks after work? Alehouses, on the other hand, were for the
probably during work, you imagine, right?
Ordinary people. Dank, dark, and smelling of stale ale, with rushes strewn across the floor, they were rowdy places full of laughter, tall tales, and bawdy songs. They existed simply for the entertainment of the masses and were full to the brim with everyone and anyone, from carters and carpenters to gong farmers and from sailors to strumpets. For the commoners, there were alcoholic alternatives to beer. Rough cider was produced in large quantities in the west and south of England.
Gotta get that cider,
baby. In the late Middle Ages, at the manor of Alkeston in Sussex, over 500 gallons of cider were made every year.
500 gallons. And there's not a lot of people at that time either.
Day laborers were often paid in food and drink for their toil. Providing strong ale was seen as a way of keeping employees motivated and well-nourished. The better the beer, the higher the calories, and landowners would often fight over workers by offering the strongest ale. It's not known how the workers were able to remain productive though when they were loaded with high-strength beer. It's thought that ale may have constituted up to half of the daily calorific intake of an English peasant.
Bro, I couldn't handle it. There's no way. I'd be so tired the whole time I was at work. Then again, their work days were a lot different back then. They're not set up like ours are. You know what I mean? Ours were, there was that caffeine boom in the late 1900s that like just kind of got the golden age. That's actually how brakes were invented. I don't know if you guys knew that. They realized their workers were more, they worked harder after a coffee break or a tea break, get caffeine in them. And then they extended the work days to longer work days.
In 1218,
obviously this is medieval times. This is much different than now. I don't even know how long they worked back then, but it was, man, I'm gonna have to rewatch that. There's a book actually about caffeine that was fantastic that I read that broke all this down. But yeah, not really related to this. So we'll.
9 carters at Battle Abbey Manor in Ferring were given rye bread, cheese, and ale in the morning, fish, meat, and more drink at midday, and more ale in the evening before going home. 100 years later, in Nottingham, some mowers were given pottage, bread, beef, pork, lamb, veal, and ale to mow the Lord's meadow. They were allowed to enter the manor another 3 times for a refill of more drink. Then they were given a bucket of ale to take home at the end of their shift.
Okay.
Beer money.
Beer money!
Communal activities were always a good excuse for heavy drinking, and on those occasions it was even encouraged.
Okay.
Religious and seasonal festivals like Whitsun, Michaelmas, and Hocktide saw the charitable concept of church ale.
Everybody loves a good party, dude.
In some
Even the peasants.
areas called Scot Ale or
Fuck
Leet
yeah.
Ale. The idea was that people would donate beer or the ingredients to brew a batch of ale and then buy it back by the cupful. It was a way of raising funds, sometimes as charitable donations to the poor. In Wiltshire during the 13th century at the Deverills, the Scot Ale went on for 3 days. On the last day, any bachelors in the village were encouraged to drink any ale that was left for free as long as they could stand up. Communal drinking often took place in the churchyard, and the church authorities regarded the drunken affairs as ungodly, as they often led to.
The church is like, hey, this is a good idea, and then they're like, whoa, they're taking this shit too far.
Disorder. There were
Drunken disorderly, baby.
attempts to ban the church ale, and although the clergy were forbidden from taking part, this order was often ignored, and the event was held away from the holy building instead, with the clerics joining in. Archbishop Langham went so far as demanding the excommunication of anyone taking part.
There it is. I was going to say, there was the guys that snuck away. They're like, all right, all right, God, hold on. I'll be back. Give me a sec. I'll be right back. I promise.
In quote,
Whoa. What's your sins to?
these common drinking bouts.
Okay. This is interesting so far, honestly.
Hatches, matches, and dispatches.
Hatches, batches, and dispatches.
Drinking was a part of medieval life from birth. Neighbouring women who helped with the birthing would bring drink with them as they assisted in the labour. This was for nourishment and to fortify them during the ordeal. A special drink was brewed known as Mother's Coddle, which consisted of warm ale with added wine, sugar, and spices. It was meant to sustain the woman's strength during childbirth. It was seen as an essential part of the process for mothers to have booze, even when they were in labour, and to help in their healing process after. Once a child was born, the parents were expected to provide drinks for the guests at the christening. Just as it is today, drinking was an accepted part of marriage celebrations. Bride's ale was a tradition practiced by most families and involved either the bride or her mother brewing a batch.
I definitely drank too much on my wedding night. Way too much. Your boy was a mess.
Of ale for friends and neighbours to
It was so much fun.
enjoy. The catch was they had to pay a ridiculous amount for the tipple. The profits went to the happy couple as a wedding gift. The tradition became so popular in England that the words bride's ale merged to form the word bridal. But the church was not happy, and 100 years after Bishop Langham had called for the banning of Scot ales, bride ales were prohibited in the parishes of Canterbury.
God damn it.
Many couples exchanged their vows or marriage contracts where else but in the tavern. This could cause problems though, as one woman discovered when she was dragged before the ecclesiastical courts. Apparently, she had contracted a marriage with a man who had proposed to her in the tavern one night as they were drinking. The woman argued that just because she chose to accompany a man for drinks didn't mean that she was now contracted to marry him. On the death of
The logic here is fucking wild. Hey, you went with a guy to the tavern, you're married.
a wealthy person, large quantities of alcohol were consumed at the wake. In 1319, at the funeral of the Bishop of Winchester in Suffolk, London, 1,100 gallons of ale were consumed. People would often leave instructions in their will that drink had to be given to the poor on the expectation that they would then pray for the soul of the departed. When the will of Stephen Thomas of Lee in Essex was read out in 1417, he had stipulated that, quote, 10 bushels of malt should be brewed after his death so that every poor man might have a gallon of ale. Some wills also made provision of alcohol for their loved ones. For example, a widow might be provided with a certain quantity of wine for the rest of her life.
They're like, listen, your loved one died. Here's a lifetime of free alcohol. Have fun.
Have another.
Have another.
In the aftermath of the Black Death, living standards rose along with wages as the demand for land declined. There were too many jobs available and not enough people to fill the vacancies. Many abandoned their villages and migrated to the towns and cities. By the beginning of the 15th century, a craftsman in the south of England was able to buy 4 gallons of good ale with a day's wages. That's 3 times the amount he would have been able to purchase 100 years previously. The poorer villagers and townspeople, who probably drank buttermilk or water from wells and springs because they could not find the money for beer, were now able to afford it, and more
A buttermilk beer? That's like something from fucking Harry Potter, right?
people than ever were drinking alcohol. This caused Sir John Fortescue to now remark that the English peasantry drank no water unless it be for devotion.
The only time you drink water is for devotion.
The demon drink.
Uh-oh.
Just as it does today, too much alcohol could lead to accidents, trouble, aggression, fights, and even murders.
Yeah.
Many towns imposed a curfew on their citizens to prevent people from falling into rivers and getting into brawls. Making it home was no guarantee of safety either when someone was badly intoxicated. Like one man from Oxford named John Astol, who was very drunk and died after dinner sitting to eat with a knife in his hand, when he not only fell asleep but also fell on the knife and was wounded around the navel.
What a dumbass. Can you imagine dying like that? Can you imagine dying like that? Having a kitchen knife and you drank yourself into oblivion and then you died from falling on the kitchen knife on the table? What a dumbass way to go, man.
He also died by falling on his knife when he was drunk and stumbled in his bedchamber. And there's a couple
You know they were fucking sword fighting. Oh, just fucking going at it, dude.
who appeared in the Oxford coroner's rolls. Quote, in the 25th year of King Edward, Adam Gould and Marjorie his wife had been at a tavern and were drunk beyond measure, went to bed, left the candle burning, and fell asleep. Marjorie was burned even to the belly and died the next day. Adam could not save her and scarce escaped, his hands and feet burnt to the bone.
Jesus.
Or William, who was standing at the top of his London tenement stairs, drunk and naked, one August night in 1336.
Jack be nimble, Jab be quick.
Sadly, William, who was relieving himself, misjudged his footing and fell
Wait a second. He was relieving himself at the top of the stairs? Straight to hell.
to the floor
Straight
where
to
he
hell.
perished. There is always the possibility that violence will occur when people consume too much alcohol, which is what happened to
Lazy
Arnold and
bastard.
John, who by all accounts were friends or at least friendly. They sat together, consuming a tipple in a tavern known as the Moses in 1420. It wasn't long before resentment flared, and because of the alcohol, Arnold was more than a little rude about John's concubine. Affronted, John drew his dagger and attacked his companion, pinning him to the floor of the tavern. Then Arnold drew his knife and stabbed his friend, killing him. For the medievals, drink and drunkenness were a socially accepted part of life.
Goddamn.
After all, it wasn't called merry old England for nothing. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe if you're enjoying these videos, and I'll see you next week for another one. Until then, hope you all
Absolutely.
have an awesome week. Cheers.
Absolutely. Definitely going to get a like and subscribe. That was a great video. Subbed, liked. I do turn off notifications just because I don't mess with them. There is the video, guys. Get over there and give that a like and a sub if you can. Who's headed to the tavern tonight? That's the first one. Some people have the ability to maintain a functional life while drunk 24/7. I batted with alcohol. I'm imagining I batted with alcohol, with alcohol for 18 years. Trust me, I am not the only one of these people. When I woke up and was hungover, if I had a drink, I would not be able to work. I am a Finnish carpenter. So every day I worked for those 18 years while I was shaking and hungover as hell. I would keep a flask in my van. Damn, dude. So that the second I was done, I could start the process of feeling normal again. I would go on binges that would last months until I would go back to the ER over and over. I have been to the ER over 100 times for alcohol withdrawal. Not fun. I am so, so, so proud to say I have almost 5 years sober. Hey, good for them. Good for them.